Okay, friends, this is part 2 of the VIC-3 video series. Hopefully you watched the last video. If not, I've pasted the link to that first video in the description. Please see that one first so you can see how this whole thing is set up and the radios in the truck and everything like that. But here I wanted to show the VIC-3 in action. Now, I will mention that in addition to being able to monitor your radios and decide which radios you want to work and transmit on, of course, the other purpose of this whole system is for intercom, vehicle intercom. I haven't played with that much at all, actually, and I don't know that I plan to. I don't know that in this vehicle I'm going to have the noise levels that would require an intercom system to be able to communicate with each other. Or anything like that, you know. So I haven't played with it, but it works, and you know, this whole switch here is dedicated to managing it. Vox means that you can communicate with each other just by talking. It'll open up the squelch. PTT means you've got to key up your headset to talk to each other. Live, I think, means it's always on. You can hear background. I believe you could hear background noise and everything, as opposed to Vox, which is essentially squelched until you speak. And then override. I guess if two people are joking around in your tank and you're coming under fire, you can override and tell them to shut the hell up. Anyway, I don't really know much more about it, and you can decide, you know, to be on the intercom or not in terms of that. But what I wanted to show you here today is the capabilities I plan to use, which are namely being able to monitor an individual radio or all radios at the same time, which is convenient when you don't know when you're whatever. You've got some repeaters and you're playing HF at the same time, and then which to transmit. I'm going to do that using this RF7850. I just posted a video on the programming of this this radio, and what I've done is I've set up 3 frequencies: 51 megahertz, 52 megahertz, and 53 megahertz. And what I've done is on the radios, I have the SINGARs set to 51 megahertz. I've got the RF7800M set to 52 megahertz. And the 5800, which is normally my HF set, which does go to 60 megahertz, so I've got that set to 53 megahertz. And so I'll show you how all this works. Okay, the first test we're going to do is showing how, when you have monitor set to all, that you can listen to all radios simultaneously. If any of them break squelch, you can, you know, you'll hear it. So it just is useful for monitoring several frequencies without a scan function, which of course these radios all have, or not most of them have it anyways, the ability to scan. But this allows you to do it without scanning. Now, you can even do a combination of things. If you wanted to, for example, this could be scanning a list of repeaters. This could be scanning a list of your favorite HF frequencies. And you could be listening to the results of that scan here. So I'm just turning up the volume, and hopefully you can hear it well enough out of this handset. But what I've done is, so I've set this to all, so you were listening to all radios right now, but all radios have their squelch on. So one by one, I'm going to turn the squelch off, and you'll hear, hopefully, I'll make this nice and loud, hopefully you'll hear it. So on the SINGARs, we move it from squelch on to squelch off. Okay. Then we move over to this on 53 megahertz. Again, I'm not changing anything there. I'm just leaving it as is. I'll turn the squelch off here. All right, you hear that? And then we move up to this radio. Changing the squelch on this is just a little bit more involved. We'll go to squelch and go from tone to off. And you can also hear that it's got a little beep in the background telling you that you're on an unsecured channel. All right, let's turn the squelch back on. So what you can see here is that without changing anything, without changing anything, I'm listening to all radios simultaneously. Of course, I don't know what would happen. Let's turn them all on at the same time. Let's see. Yeah, well, you get the idea. You get the idea. Okay, and the final test of all is I'm going to leave this on all, so all three radios are receiving at the same time, and I'll just change the frequency on the transmitter, and you'll see without doing anything we could hear everything. So here's 51 megahertz. Test, 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 test. This is the Singars. This is the Singars. Test, test. Great. Now we well, I guess I can show you this too. Test, test, test. Okay, that worked. And then without doing anything, we switched to 52 megahertz, which is this. Test, test, test. You can see the little bar graph. Test, test, test. And hopefully you can hear this. Test, 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 test. And then finally, switch to 53 megahertz. Test, test, test. Yeah, this one's pretty loud. W2HX, test, test. So that shows how all radios are receiving on their frequencies, and we could just hear any of them without any work. And then, so for my next trick, I'm going to show you how I can listen to one radio at a time. So let me review what the radios are. So the Singars is radio C. The Harris is radio D. And this is radio F, only because that's how I happen to get it all set up. This may change in the future. So now instead of listening to all, I'm going to listen to one radio at a time. So here's radio C, which is this. Okay, that works. You can hear that, but this will not be audible because this is radio F. So I turn the squelch off, squelch on, squelch off. You don't hear it at all. And the same with the other. So now you're only listening to one radio at a time. For example, if you go to radio F, this will not make a difference. Oops. Why is that doing that? Okay, I've got to... Oh, because I'm still monitoring C. Sorry, I'm doing the wrong thing. So I want to monitor F. I want to listen to radio F, which is the Harris HF radio. And what you'll see is you'll turn this. This makes no difference now, but this will make a difference. Okay, now the other thing, let's work on transmit. So here we are, 51 megahertz, and I'm working radio. I'm going to monitor the one I work here. So in this setting, I pick the radio I want to work, and I monitor the same exact radio. So it's basically a very simple way to switch between radios, nothing fancy. And just to show you, so this is radio C, 51 megahertz. Let's set this to 52 megahertz, and you'll see that you will not hear anything. Test, 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 nothing. But if we set this to 51 megahertz, hopefully you can see this is 51. This is 51, and I will transmit, and you will even see the signal LED next to the frequency. Test, test, test. Test, test, test. I don't know if you could hear that. Test, 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 test. Okay, so that works. Now from radio C, we can go to radio D. This is radio D on 52 megahertz. And just to show you again, here's 51. You will not hear it. Test, 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 test. Okay, now we switch it to 52 megahertz, and you will hear it. Test, 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 test. This is a test, 52 megahertz, W2HX. And you can also hear the insecure channel beep from the radio. Okay. And then finally, we go to radio F, which is this, set to 53 megahertz. And I'm going to turn this volume down a little. I'm still on 52. You'll see that it will not, you'll not hear it. Test, test, test. Okay, but as soon as we switch it to 53 megahertz, and you can watch the radio. Test, test. Oops, I gotta turn the radio up a little bit more. Test, 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 test. Test, 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 test. Yeah, hopefully you're hearing that. I probably need some more volume. Let's try it. Let's try one time. Test, test, test. There you go. You can hear a little echo, and that's the received audio. Test. I should point out that none of these radios have antennas. The HF one's got a little dummy load on it because when it transmits, it prefers to have some kind of a load on it. And then let's do the opposite. Let's show how you can, not only can you receive different radios, but you can transmit. So let's go again to radio C. Radio C again is the Singars, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the handset to transmit, and you'll hear it on this radio. Let's set this one to 51. Test, 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 test. Test, test, test. And just to prove that it's working, I can change it to another radio D, which is on another frequency, and nothing will happen. Test, test, test. Okay, so now radio D, again, 52 megahertz. Change this radio to 52 megahertz, and now I'm on a different radio. Test, 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 test. And then finally, we'll go to 53 megahertz. 53 megahertz, and change this to radio F. Again, radio F is the Harris radio here. Lower the volume so we don't get quite as much feedback. Test, 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 test. Test, W2HX test. And there you have it. So that's a demonstration of how it makes this VIC system really makes operating a set of radios very convenient, because you can choose the radio, transmit on that radio, any radio you want, or listen to all of them for traffic. So anyway, that concludes this part of the second part of the VIC-3 system demonstration. I hope you enjoyed it.